Hi there, thank you for joining me for another episode of Total Ramblings. Today we are looking at episode 7 of series 2 of Andor, and this episode is entitled Messenger. And there are going to be some massive spoilers here, so if you haven't seen this episode, Andor, if you don't want to be spoiled as to what happens in this episode, then probably best to come back and watch this video later. So we're in the next block of 3 episodes released by Disney+. So this is episodes 7, 8 and 9. We're looking at episode 7 today. And we are now 2 years before the Battle of Yavin. So the Death Star out there somewhere is getting ever more complete. We know with some of Andor's fingerprints on it, some work, because he was forced to work and build some bits. And we have a very introspective episode here. Because things are about to kick off, I think, on the planet Ghorman. We're getting very close to the rebellion becoming an outright civil war within the galaxy. And it's interesting, we don't see Luthen at all in this episode, but his presence is felt. We've got a situation where the Empire are playing the rebels because they need the Calcite from within Ghorman, and Luthen is playing the Empire, and they both kind of want the same thing for different reasons, really. Anyway, we start off, brilliant scene. The rebels are now established on the moon of Yavin 4. Wilman, Andor, Bix is there. It looks like we've got new rebel troopers arriving every day. The base is really expanding. It's nice to see some of the outside base accommodation. Kind of looks a little bit like Andor sort of buildings, but I mean, it's a forest, right? What are you going to do? But yes, basically the rebellion now has an army. This particular rebel cell, anyway, they have X-Wings painted in gold, which is interesting. Don't know what's happened with Saw Gerrera's rebels. I'd need to check on the history as to what's happened with them canonically. We know they're still around by the time of Rogue One, but now regular rebel cells, not just Saw's rebels, have got X-Wings, and Wilmon is back on Yavin 4 and not with Saw, so he may be off doing his own thing. There may have been a split, don't know. Andor's living with Bix. Andor's been injured on some mission. He's got a blaster burn on his shoulder that won't heal. He basically gets a message from Wilman, who visits and says, Luthen needs to know if you're ready to work. Andor wants to know where Will has been on several sort of runs, and he's been to Ghorman and back several times. And he basically, our worlds kind of come crashing together now because Will has instructions from Luthen to assassinate ISB supervisor Dedra Meero, who is now on Ghorman with her partner Cyril. Basically, they want her taken out. Now, the first thing that occurs to me is this meant to be the incident that causes the Empire to crack down? Because we see later on that there's ongoing terrorist attacks on Ghorman. Basically, we have a glimpse, well, we see some scenes on Ghorman later. The Palmo Armory is now complete. The Imperial base in the centre of the capital is complete. There's various news reports all over the place about ongoing terrorist attacks. There's a curfew. Responses are being escalated. We'll come to this storyline in a sec. But are these things being set up? Is this all, an excuse? Anyway, we'll come back to that in a sec. And Bix takes Andor to a force healer to heal the burn. And this is interesting. I think this is the first reference we've got to the Force in Andor. I could be wrong. I know we get references to the Force in Rogue One, but we're not in the world of Jedi and Sith here in Andor. Those people exist, but they're so high in the stratosphere or in hiding. Like I've said many times, this is gutter level Star Wars. This is people trying to survive day to day. Anyway, she kind of senses Andor before she even sees him, and we kind of get this like sort of religious experience for this Force healer, because she kind of senses the weight that's on Andor, and she senses his purpose, almost as if she senses that he's like a focal point, a nexus point within the Force. Also, the fact that she's a Force healer, I'm thinking this is an explicit reference to the sequels where Force healing was introduced. A lot of people kind of got upset. We've never seen this before. Yes, but we haven't not seen it either. And it makes sense, right? That some people probably will have the ability to heal using the Force. We know what the Force is capable of. We know what the Force can be used for. I wonder if that'll be the comment that gets someone to dislike my video. One of my Andor videos got disliked, and I don't know why, because all I'm doing is repeating the plot. Anyway, yeah, so Andor's burn seems to start to heal. And then Andor, we see a lovely scene in the Yavin 4 sort of hangar bay, and we meet General Draven again, who we met in Rogue One. So this is obviously, that's in the future now. And Andor and Wilman are loading up a U-wing, and sort of the general's not very happy that Andor's kind of coming and going without permission. Kind of says, look, there's going to come a point in time where you're going to need permission. And Andor's like, well, I'm kind of a free spirit sort of thing. And this is interesting, right? Because we kind of see this difference between the fact. So this is a mission that he's been given by Luthen, not known by the rebels as a whole, if that makes sense. So there's a kind of a tension there, right? Anyway, Andor and Will fly off to Ghorman in their U-wing. Lovely, beautiful shot of them leaving the Yavin 4 moon with Yavin in the background. Vel visits Bix whilst Andor is away and says that they need Andor. They're not Luthen's puppets anymore. They're a proper army now, and they were going to promote Andor, and now he's gone and buggered off and done this mission that no one knows about. So, anyway, yeah, as I say, Andor arrives on Ghorman, and he's posing there as a journalist. There's a little bit of a kerfuffle because he doesn't have an entry stamp in the hotel, and they're obliged to report these kinds of things. And it's interesting because the guy at the check-in that serves Andor was the bellboy before in the last episode when Andor was going under a different name, and he recognises him, and he knows that he's not who he says he is. He knows he's met him before under another guise, and kind of says, my colleague's going to have to report this kind of thing. But yeah, it's interesting that this guy seems to know what's going on. So we have one kind of aside with Mon Mothma arriving at the Imperial Senate, and she hears news reports of the Ghorman attacks, and she meets with Senator Oren, who's responsible for Ghorman, and they kind of have a brief chat, and she says, well, we're raising a petition, but there's not a lot they can do really, and it's implied that the Empire is lying, which is kind of where I'm thinking to myself, are these attacks real? Are they fake? But let's get into that. So back on Ghorman, as we say, there is a curfew. Dedra is now on Ghorman with Cyril, and she's there for the end game, basically, because Major Partagaz contacts her and says, we're going forward with the plan. We have not been able to synthesize calcite. Basically, he's had scientists on Edu looking into it. Edu, I think, is where we see this in Rogue One, kind of like their top secret research facility where Galen Erso, I think, is based. And basically, we're going to have to rip the calcite out of the ground, and there's not going to be much of a home left. And I do think it's interesting. Yes, of course, the Empire is being utterly ruthless in, wanting to extract this mineral and basically destroy the planet. But they have, to be fair, made strenuous efforts to try and replicate this material, and they can't. So it's not like they've just taken the easy option. So give them that. I guess, though, with the Senate still in play, the Emperor's options are limited. Anyway, they say to Dedra that they need a declaration of martial domain as soon as possible because the fleet is assembling. They have sent Captain Kado, who is a crisis specialist. And basically, Major Partagaz says, look, if we pull this off, then we will have reinforced the ISB's position at the Emperor's side. So this is, one big sort of political kind of power play. Cyril briefly meets with Dedra. And he thinks all these attacks are a setup. And I think maybe he's starting to realise that he might have been played. Somebody on Facebook the other day said, I wonder when Cyril will turn to the rebellion. And I kind of laughingly said, not everyone has to have a redemption arc. But I'm thinking, well, maybe Cyril is starting to realise that he's being used here because he doesn't believe all these stories. Cyril meets with Enza, the daughter of the Ghorman front leader, and he basically says, look, my people think you're being played by outside agitators, which is the very role that he was kind of brought in to play. And in a later scene, we see some Imperial sort of specialist troops arrive. Dedra's not impressed, says they look like children. I have to wonder, are these guys meant to be sacrificial lambs? Are these guys meant to get blown up in some kind of rebel atrocity and sacrificed for the Empire's greater aims? Don't know. But basically, in the final scene of this episode, we see Andor in his hotel room, literally scoping out the situation because he's there to assassinate Dedra. But he's slightly boxed in by the fact that there's stormtroopers everywhere. And that's that. So as I say, a very introspective episode, obviously building up, a lot of tension, a lot of disagreement, between rebel factions and groups and people like this. And it's all getting very tense, if it wasn't tense already. And some fantastic world building here and some fantastic imagery, as particularly on Yavin 4, and also interesting to see as all these pieces finally come into play. And interesting that we didn't see Luthen at all. It's kind of like things are almost out of his hands now to a degree. There is a rebellion. There is an army building. We've yet to, I think, have the declaration of the Rebel Alliance, but there are certainly rebel groups knocking around, and as they say in Episode 4 of Star Wars, they're better equipped than you realise. So, I am going to be releasing a video a day of these reviews, but I think I'm going to go straight and watch the next episode because this is brilliant stuff. So, thank you very much for watching this episode of Total Ramblings. I hope to see you in the next episode. Please do all the usual YouTubey stuff, like, subscribe, share, comment, downvote, etc. Hate me, do whatever you like, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.